Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Larry Rhodes.
And I'm Phil King, and we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is the show for them, people curious about living a life free of supernatural beliefs.
This month is the birth month of Robert G. Ingersoll, and today we will review important events in his life and times.
This is a call-in show. While we go over a few announcements, we invite you to start calling in now at the number on the screen. Get a pen and paper and give us your email address when you call.
We will give them our email.
We will give them our email.
Yeah. The Atheist Society of Knoxville meets up down at Barley's every week on Tuesday for a happy hour, and today is no exception. The crew of the show will meet down there after we get through at 6 o'clock, but you can join the meetup down there starting at 5:30. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table.
And Rationalists of East Tennessee is another free thought group in East Tennessee. Started around 1996, and we meet just about every Sunday of the month. First and third Sundays, we have lively table discussions. We have a book club on the second Sunday at Barnes & Noble. And on the fourth Sunday, we have a reflections gathering at someone's house. This August 7th meeting, we will talk about 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism by Ha-Joon Chang. And one of the things they didn't tell us about capitalism was why was the stock market going to crash today.
And this third Sunday, August 21st, there's a presentation and discussion, Jesus, Fact or Fiction. And the fourth Sunday is the Reflections Gathering, a potluck afternoon gathering of members at a member's home. Visit our website for additional details, including times and locations. And there's an email address you can send it to if you have questions or comments about the show. And at the top of the screen, of course, is the links to the websites. Now we're getting to the In the News segment of the show for August 2nd, 2011. We note that there are just now 80 days of tribulations left.
What are days of tribulations left?
Well, that's when the rapture was supposed to have happened.
Right.
And we're
in May.
And we're theoretically in the days of tribulation now.
Okay.
If all goes as the people of Family Radio claim, then we will only get to say that 11 more times.
Well, is it still going to happen even though rapture didn't happen?
Well, the end of the world theoretically is supposed to come.
Still coming.
October, I believe it is.
Okay. All right.
But of course, that's not going to happen either. Now I guess we're ready to get on into Ingersoll.
Let's talk about Robert Ingersoll. Why are we talking about Robert Ingersoll this month? This August is the birth month.
We're going to spend a lot of time this whole month talking about Robert G. Ingersoll. His life, his works, his attitudes, his descriptions of religion, and specifically a lot of talk about his critiques of the Christian religion.
He was a pretty important person to people like us, free thinkers, agnostics, atheists. He was probably held in some contempt in the 18th century, in the 19th century. But he left a lot of writings and left a legacy, if you will.
Now he was born the son of an abolitionist-leaning Presbyterian preacher who was, whether he meant to or not, did a lot of traveling.
That's right.
His abolitionist leanings would get him in trouble with the local area a lot of times, and they would just ask him kindly to move on to somewhere else. But his radical views forced his family to move frequently. For a period of time, Reverend Ingersoll filled the pulpit for American revivalists Charles G. Finney, while Finney was on tour of Europe. Upon his return, Ingersoll remained for a few months as a co-pastor and associate pastor. This is Robert G. Ingersoll's father.
Right.
So he knew Robert G. Ingersoll knew the Bible pretty well, being raised by a Presbyterian preacher.
So a lot of people think he might have turned against religion because his father led an austere group of people, but that's not quite the case, is it?
That's not the case, no. I think he's turned against it because of what the dogma itself says, the positions that it has to hold in the moral landscape. But as far as his father goes, his father was apparently a liberal abolitionist.
Pretty liberal. Women's suffrage.
Right.
He was really into women's suffrage and abolition of the slaves, of the slave laws. So what kind of trouble did that get his father? We're getting a little bit here into why Robert Ingersoll turned into being anti, first of all, Calvinism, and then secondly, anti-Christianity. And it was because of his experiences as a young boy, maybe 9 through teenage years. His father was getting in all kinds of trouble with the church he preached for, wasn't he?
Because of his leanings, yes.
Because of his leanings.
And when he was 9 years old, his father was actually removed from the church, I understand.
That's right. Yeah.
Because of very technical differences he had with the founding fathers of the church.
So you're a 9-year-old boy, and you're seeing your father doing what he loves to do, and he's getting in trouble doing what he loves to do.
Over piddling little stuff.
Over piddling little stuff, yeah.
And being actually thrown out of the religion, or out of the church.
Larry, why was he getting in trouble over abolition views in Ohio? I thought Ohio was sort of pro-abolition.
I would say so, but there are left-leaning and right-leaning people in all kinds of areas of the country, and apparently there were still quite a few people there, and especially if you're talking about the Presbyterian Church, I would think you'd have right-leaning people who the Bible says, slavery is okay.
Yeah, right.
So if that particular case was the case, and one of the preachers thought, no, it's not,
right.
Then you would get in trouble from that.
I would think so, yes.
Let's put a little bit more historical context on this. Many of the founding fathers, you've got to remember that Ingersoll lived in the middle of the 18th century, but he inherited a lot of ideas and stuff from the founding fathers and the Constitution and the thought that went before. Many of the founding fathers were deists, meaning they believed in God, but they didn't have any dogma attached to it. He started the universe or started humanity or whatever, but he wasn't constantly involved with it like Christians and Muslims and other religious groups think that he is constantly involved with every aspect of your life. Deists think that you may have had a God, but that's pretty much it. He turned on the motor of the universe
and let it go. Yeah.
Now, many of these were like Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison, and those particular ones were anti-Christian dogma. They did not like Christianity at all. You may say, well, the founding fathers were all Christians. No, they weren't. Most of, if not all, were dead set against the government representing religion at all. Ingersoll helped revive the memory of Thomas Paine from almost total obscurity. We'll get into that a little bit more. I can leave that for then. But what we're trying to build here is the context of the position that Ingersoll lived in. He lived right after the beginning of the Second Great Awakening, which may have had something to do with his rebound effect against religion.
Right.
So
when the Second Great Awakening, I think that I was reared in a church. I think they call that the Restoration. Is that the same thing as the Restoration in this country?
I'm not familiar with that.
It was sort of a return to the Bible, sort of in a literal sense. I think that
it was a great wave of revivalists that were setting up tents and going across the country. And
Alexander Campbell. And Martin Stone, people like that.
There was an area in Upper New York called the Great Burned Area, I think it was, where they kept going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth across it, where it was like a war zone almost. The rivaling religions were having these revival tent showings. But it may have been have something to do with his rebound effect against religion per se, because he was seeing such a resurgence of it in the society at large, like we were seeing,
This man, Robert Ingersoll, was a very popular orator at this time, wasn't he?
He
I'm surprised when I read some of the things I did in preparing for this that he seemed to be. We don't have orators like that now, do we?
No. Matter of fact, he would gather crowds at $1 a head when $1 might be a day's wages.
You know, I asked my wife to look this up. How much would that be like today? And it's about like buying a $150, $200 fundraising dinner to hear maybe Jimmy Carter or Ronald Reagan or somebody speak.
But the money then would be going to a party that you might want to support.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, it was just going for, well, it could be for that, but it also could be for entertainment value, edification, or whatever.
He was like a Will Rogers in a way, wasn't he?
He was. And he could stand and talk for like 2 to 3 hours without any amplification system and hold his audience spellbound.
They didn't fidget.
No, they were.
Can you imagine
rapt.
that happening now?
Yeah, really. And also, I forgot where I was going.
Let's. Could I maybe read his creed right now? I think this creed that he left says a lot about his philosophy. Happiness is the only good. The time to be happy is now. The place to be happy is here. The way to be happy is to make others too. That was sort of his creed in life.
So true. It's a humanistic creed.
Right.
I've always heard, even when I was growing up, it says that you can get anything you want out of life as long as you help other people get what they want out of life.
Yeah.
Which is an outward-going philosophy, which some people would call it karmic.
Yeah.
You know, you're putting out karmic good signals to be able to get good back from the universe.
Right.
But we personally don't believe that there's a karma
or an electric field around us where we emit
a supernatural
some kinds of,
scorekeeper out there about who's doing.
But
right
I think the
and what's wrong.
principle is still really good. If you do good things for other people, it comes back to you. What goes around comes around.
When you make friends, people are friends to
That's
you.
right.
That type of thing. In general cases.
My dad used to always say, and in his last years, he was getting a little feeble-minded and couldn't remember what he had said, maybe 10 minutes ago. And one time I was sitting in on a conversation, he said to have a friend, you have to be a friend. And so he said it about 10 times during the conversation.
That's true. Okay, talking a little bit more about Ingersoll's life, can we talk about maybe his early life?
Yeah.
Before too long, after he got through school, he studied law.
Right.
Became a lawyer. Studied under who was it?
He was traveling a lot too, to different towns and living in different towns. I think. I believe this was in Missouri or Illinois that he was practicing law with his brother. Maybe he was practicing law with his brother and another person that I didn't know.
Well, you weren't there.
I wasn't there, but
he was called the Great Agnostic during his time.
Right.
When he was a teacher, he did teach some before he went on to start his law career.
Right.
One of his students, the future Judge Angus McBain, he let him do the greater part of the teaching while he went ahead to learn more about history and Latin.
Right. And I thought that was a pretty smart move too. I mean, if you can, it's like having an intern, right? And let them do all the work. And while you're learning more about philosophy and more about law, more about those kinds of things, it probably helped him a lot in his orations later in life.
Sure it did.
Yeah, his family, I read, settled in Marion, Illinois, where he and his brother, Eben Clark Ingersoll, were admitted to the bar in 1854. So that was about 6-7 years before the Civil War started.
Right.
And I heard that he was a pretty ruthless lawyer.
Everybody says that he was a really honest and well-put lawyer, well-spoken lawyer. Of course he would be. But he was honest in his trade and well representing his client.
Let me read you something that a county historian who wrote 22 years after he was admitted to the bar said about the Ingersolls. Said they are a very intellectual family, but being abolitionists and the boys being deists rendered obnoxious to our people in that respect. So he was the family was not always popular with the local people.
Right. Well, they weren't towing the religious line that they were expected to tow.
That's right. And while in Marion, he studied law under Judge Willis Allen. That's who he studied under, and served as deputy clerk for John Cunningham. And then he was named registrar in 1855 for the Federal Land Office in Shawneetown, Illinois.
Now that was about, well, he went on to become the state's attorney for the state of Illinois.
So he was in politics a while.
He did do that for a while, but they tried to get him to go into higher politics, but they would tell him that he would have to hold back or secret his agnostic leanings.
Not let people know
Not
that
let
he
people
was an
know about his
agnostic.
Freethought leanings. He said, no, I can't do that because I believe in openness in government.
Right,
and
right.
He wouldn't do that.
I wish more of our politicians were a little bit more like that now.
To be sure. One of the problems I have with Obama, and I did vote for him, of course, is that he's still so secretive. You know, he keeps his politics, and, well, I won't get into that.
He is, right,
But
yes.
he does that, and I don't
Well, that may be
accept
smart.
that. Well, it can be said to be smart, but for different versions and reasons. But it was funny that even then he couldn't run. I mean, this is during the time that the Great Second Revival was going on, that he still couldn't come out to national office because of his religious
And
or
because of
leanings.
his leanings for abolition and for women's suffrage. So he was ahead of his time for sure.
Right.
When did women's suffrage come about? In the 1920s or
1920s or
30s?
Started
So that's still
the
50
movement
years
started in
after
the 20s.
this.
Yeah. Quite a while. And he was asked to raise a militia, I believe, when the American Civil War started.
That's right. I was surprised about this part. He's formed his own militia. I guess you could do that now.
Back then, most attorneys were considered instant officers in the army if they had to be recruited during times of war,
Yeah.
and required to raise their own militia and report it for duty. Of course, his particular one I could tell where I was looking here. There was the 11th Regiment of Illinois Volunteer Cavalry, and he took command of it after he raised it, and fought in the Battle of Shiloh. He was captured later, and then released on his own promise that he would not fight again.
Fight again, yeah.
Which was a gentleman's promise, an officer's promise during the early part of the war, which happened an awful lot back then. Rather than trying to support you all the way through the war, keep you in prison, try to keep you healthy and maintained and all that stuff.
They would just let you go back home.
They would ask you for your promise not to become involved in the war anymore, not to fight, not to support the war. And if you promised that, they would let you go on home. And that would be nice. Nowadays,
that was sort of early in the war, wasn't it, when they would do that?
It was.
And he fought in the Battle of Shiloh, you said. I saw a program on the Civil War the other day. Well, Ken Burns, I was looking at that again, and Shiloh, if I'm not mistaken, was a bloody battle.
It really was.
Where
One of
more
the most
people
famous
were really famous.
Civil War
So he
battles.
survived that.
And went on to live and become the great orator, the Great Agnostic.
Why do you think we can't have any orators today like that? Why don't you become an orator like that,
some
Larry?
people would say that we do. When you go to a super church, a mega church, nowadays you get somebody standing up there.
I mean a great
talk.
secular orator.
Time is coming. It's coming, I think. It's just, I don't know. I mean, the time is ripe, I think, for one to emerge.
Do you think?
But,
you think
say
they were
Richard
more tolerant?
Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, all of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, as they call them.
But they're more
could be.
writers, aren't they, and scientists?
Well, we have the internet now.
Yeah.
And you can reach a lot more people with one post to the internet that you ever could.
That's true.
With the.
But you know, I'd like to see somebody come to town, Knoxville, like this guy, and them sell tickets for $100, $150 and fill up the Coliseum.
I definitely think there's a place for that. If we could get a secular, I was going to say Oral Roberts, but I'd rather say, what's his name, who was real big back in the 50s and 60s.
I can't remember who that was.
Oh, his son is doing it now. Graham.
Oh, Billy Graham.
Billy Graham.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I did go see. But you're still talking about religious orators.
You know what I'm saying? We need a secular orator of the stature of Billy Graham to be able to represent and
That's
go around
right.
and raise crowds and awareness to the secular cause and reason and scientific method, that type of thing.
Right.
Some people say that people like Tyson,
the scientist at the New York Natural History Museum, yes,
is doing that kind of job.
towards science at least. He may not get into the philosophical area too much.
He doesn't do it as much as he says he does, or
Right.
Let me put it this way: he does it more than he says he does.
Yeah, right. Well, I saw him once at an atheist conference in Atlanta.
Yeah, was he talking about Islam?
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't remember. No, I don't know. I think he was just talking about science.
What he was talking about, and one of the presentations that I heard him speak on was about the Arabic people. He says they were a thriving culture. They created the numbers. We call them the Arabic numbers, but they named the stars. The stars, many of the time, I mean, if you look up and look at the names of the stars, are Arabic names. They had a thriving scientific inquiry going on, and then Muhammad showed up.
Yes.
And he made them, instead of turning outward into the universe, they turned inward into their own his teachings and the book and religious, and then
well, I wonder
it ended pretty much their scientific entity, as it were.
Yeah, I'm wondering if somebody like John Stewart might be a sort of a orator type for these present days.
Yeah, he does a pretty good job of that, but he certainly doesn't do it for us much, does he? For the Freethought community or atheists in general.
Yeah.
Bill Maher.
Bill Maher, definitely.
You might say
I went to hear him speak in Knoxville. Bill Maher.
Yeah, he did come. How was it?
It was very good. It was like Bill. I mean, Bill Maher's always sort of the same, no matter where you see him. You know, he's very refreshing.
Yeah. Okay, looks like we have our first call.
We have our first caller.
Welcome to Freethought Forum. May we have a name or nickname?
Well, hello, this is Faithless Forrest. I'm sorry I can't be with you guys today, but I was listening in, and I heard you say earlier that you were asking why don't we have great orators like that today, meaning like Ingersoll. And I wanted to suggest actually we do have some very interesting orators. Specifically, I'm thinking of Richard Dawkins as well as Sam Harris. I assume both of you have heard Dawkins and Harris, at least maybe on YouTube.
Yes. Aren't they more writers though than and scientists than orators?
Well, I believe both of them travel to visit Freethought groups and speak on Freethought, as well as Dawkins speaks on in support of science and about evolutionary biology.
Dawkins' job description, more or less, is to the public advancement of the knowledge of science, or public advancement of scientific inquiry, isn't it? I mean, that's pretty much his job. He does a very good job of it, I think.
Yes, indeed. And Harris does a great job, I think, of similar to what Ingersoll did, of talking about the deficiency of the Bible, where it contradicts itself or where its morals are indefensible. In his letter to a Christian nation, he spoke about the fact that the Bible still condones slavery, and he says even in the 20th century we've moved beyond that, and why is it that the Bible hasn't advanced? Of course, because
it can't.
The adherents believe that it's the inalterable Word of God.
Yes. Well, Jefferson tried to. He got rid of the Old Testament, got rid of the miracles and supernatural stuff of the New Testament, and published his Jeffersonian Bible. But of course, it lasted only as long as he was there to promote it. The rank and file of the religious Christian community would not, of course, accept that. That's why
I bought a copy of that Bible when I was at Williamsburg this year.
Is that right?
Or Charlottesville.
Thin book.
It's a very thin book. He cut all of what Jesus. He left what Jesus said, I think, and cut out a lot of the miracles and things like that.
Even then, though, there's a lot to be said against what Jesus actually said, like give no thought to tomorrow, leave your family to follow me.
Well, Jesus. This show is going to be dedicated to Jesus in 3 weeks from today. And Jesus was an apocalypticist, and he a Jewish apocalypticist who believed the world was going to end. So it flavored his teachings.
So we'll get to that in 3 weeks and not tie up this one too much. Was there another question or comment there for us?
Well, I think that's it. I invite other people to call in and maybe tell us your favorite Ingersoll quotes, and for the believers who call in, perhaps we can share some of Ingersoll's criticism of the Bible, both the Old and the New Testament. All right, I'm going to clear the line, ask people to call in.
Okay,
Thank you.
Forrest.
Thank you very much.
I guess we could move on to some of the things that Ingersoll was talking about when he did give his speeches.
Yes.
Some of his writings. Go ahead.
One of the things I thought would be interesting to maybe read on the air is his a eulogy that Ingersoll did for his brother when he passed away.
As an example of his
As an example
oratory.
of, he is an unbelievable writer. And so let me, if you bear with me it'll take just a few minutes, let me read that. Dear friends, I'm going to do that which the dead oft promised he would do for me. The loved and loving brother, husband, father, friend died where manhood's morning almost touches noon, and while the shadows still were falling toward the west. And this is a eulogy, I think, that could be read for not only secular funerals, but also for people of faith when they lose their loved ones also.
Their brothers.
Yeah, because he doesn't really get into much philosophy here, but his oratory is unbelievable. He had not passed on life's highway the stone that marks the highest point, but being weary for a moment, he lay down by the wayside and using his burden for a pillow, fell into that dreamless sleep that kisses down his eyelids still. While yet in love with life, enraptured with the world, he passed to silence and pathetic dust. Yet, after all, it may be best, just in the happiest, sunniest hour of all the voyage, while eager winds are kissing every sail to dash against the unseen rock, and in an instant hear the billows roar above the sunken ship. For whether in mid-sea or among the breakers of the farther shore, a wreck at last must mark the end of each and all, and every life, no matter if its every hour is rich with love and every moment jewel with a joy, will at its close become a tragedy as sad and deep and dark as can be woven of the warp and woof of mystery and death. This brave and tender man, his brother he's talking about, in every storm of life was oak and rock, but in the sunshine he was vine and flower. He was the friend of all heroic souls. He climbed the heights and left all superstitions far below, while on his forehead fell the golden dawning of a grander day. He loved the beautiful and was with color, form, and music touched to tears. He sided with the weak, the poor, and wronged, and lovingly gave alms. With loyal heart and with the purest hands, he faithfully discharged all public trust. He was a worshiper of liberty, a friend of the oppressed. 1,000 times I heard him quote these words, "For justice all place a temple, and all seasons summer." He believed that happiness is the only good, reason the only torch, justice the only worship, humanity the only religion, and love the only priest. He added to the sum of human joy, and were every one to whom he did some loving service to bring a blossom to his grave, he would sleep tonight beneath a wilderness of flowers. Life is a narrow veil between the cold and barren peaks of two eternities. We strive in vain to look beyond the heights. We cry aloud, and the only answer is the echo of our wailing cry. From the voiceless lips of the unreplying dead, there comes no word, but in the night of death, hope sees a star, and listening love can hear the rustle of a wing. He who sleeps here when dying, mistaking the approach of death for the return of his health, whispered with his latest breath, "I'm better now." Let us believe, in spite of doubts and dogmas, of fears and tears, that these dear words are true of all the countless dead. The record of a generous life runs like a vine around the memory of our dead, and every sweet, unselfish act is now a perfumed flower. And now to you who have been chosen from among the many men he loved to do the last sad office for the dead, we give his sacred dust. Speech cannot contain our love. There is no gentler, stronger, manlier man. So that was quite an eloquent tribute to his brother.
Very, very much so. Even Walt Whitman thought he was an incredible orator. He says, "It should not be surprising that I am drawn to Ingersoll, for he is leaves of grass. He lives, embodies the individual I preach." In other words, he says that he embodies the individuality. Mm-hmm. "I see in Bob the noblest specimen American flavor, pure out of the soil, spreading, giving, and demanding light." Walt Whitman wrote in his epic American poem, "Song of Myself," published in Leaves of Green, "I am a large, I contain multitudes," whereas Ingersoll, irreverent over the egalitarian once said of America, "Few nations had been so poor as to have one God. Gods are made so easily and the raw materials cost so little that generally the God market was fairly glutted and heaven crammed with these phantoms. One thing I've noticed about reading Ingersoll is that you can't go a paragraph without getting a good quote like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the man had gems of wisdom that he packs in every
he did
paragraph.
As a matter of fact, I had a list of a few of his quotes. It would be interesting to look at them.
While you're finding them, let me go through the mid-program break.
Yes, okay.
We're in the middle of it. In case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program of the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee by individual contributions.
You can send us feedback at the email address on your screen.
But do not wait. This is a call-in show.
This is a call-in show, so call now. We would love to have people call in and ask us a question.
There should be a dialogue.
I know you must have questions about Ingersoll. You know, he was considered a saint by many today, but he's not considered a saint by everybody. So call in if you have a question.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets several times during the month. We have meetups for fun, food, and drink, usually happy hours and dinner. We're atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and humanists who are reaching out with social support to other like-minded persons in East Tennessee. If you don't believe in God, you're not alone. The ASK mission statement: to supply a venue for the community, camaraderie, and outreach to the rationalists and atheists of the Knoxville area.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee has Sunday activities involving lively presentations and discussions of subjects topical and timeless, such as what every atheist should know about the Bible, what is art, the evolutionary history of flowers. Now, that was a really sexy talk, wasn't it? And thinking rationally about climate change.
All those pistils and stamens.
Yeah, all those pistils and stamens. Once a month we get together for a book club. Past books we've read include The God Delusion, The American Age of Unreason, The Virtue of Selfishness, and selfishness does have virtue to it, Whither Socialism, and Your Inner Fish.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee supports Camp Quest of the Smokies. It's a fun science summer school adventure. Visit the website on your screen or email us for further information after the show.
And Larry, that camp's going on this week, isn't it? Up in the Smoky Mountains.
Right
Jonas
now.
Holdeman has about 35 campers, I think.
So you got plenty of time to make reservations for next year.
Next year, that's right. Both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet where if you don't believe in God, you're certainly not alone in East Tennessee.
Right. Now, you were going to read some of his quotes.
Yes. Robert Ingersoll, as you said, every other line was almost a quote that could be cited by his followers later on.
And make all kinds of sense to just a casual glance.
Robert Ingersoll said that any doctrine that will not bear investigation is not a fit tenant for the mind of an honest man. He also said courage without conscience is a wild beast. So just plain naked courage is not often to be desired.
So true.
And then one thing he said I think is very important. The greatest test of courage on earth is to bear defeat without losing heart. And that's hard to do. Sometimes that's very hard to do. The true civilization is where every man gives to every other every right that he claims for himself. And that'd go for women too, I'm sure he would say. Anger is a wind which blows out the lamp of the light. I think we have a telephone call coming in now.
Welcome to
Hello.
Freethought Forum. Do you have a name or a nickname we might refer to you by?
Yeah, they call me Marlo.
Marlo, okay. Welcome to Freethought Forum. Do you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's, different places to get book lists, because when you go to McKay's, Borders, Books A Million, there's aisles on spirituality and religion, but there's not that much for the atheist or agnostic. And you have to really hunt and peck through the store to find these authors.
Right. I guess the best thing would be to go to the online bookstores or online sites and type in the word atheism or free thought.
I think also you might go to Amazon. And the published works of Ingersoll. What is it, about a 12-volume thing that the published works of Ingersoll? I would think Amazon would be a good place. Sometimes you can just Google Robert Ingersoll on the web, and I came up with a whole slew of things when I did that.
One thing about Robert Ingersoll is he lived over 100 years ago, so although the copyrights had run out on his work, you can go to places like Gutenberg.org or Gutenberg.com, and you can download them for free. And many of these secular groups out there are making even the audio tapes available for free, so you can download those and listen to them online. Were you talking specifically about Ingersoll or just Freethought books in general?
No, I wasn't talking specifically of any author. I just, you guys were talking about Ingersoll. I'm like, hey, this is a guy I've never heard of. And, I've read Richard Dawkins' book. I've read some stuff from Ayn Rand. It's funny how you have to search so hard to find authors that have an atheist point of view.
Have you read any of Carl Sagan's books? Demon Haunted World, I highly recommend. It's got a subtitle, Science as a Candle in the Dark. But Demon Haunted World is the title of it, and I highly recommend it. You don't see it much mentioned anymore.
Okay, very good.
But with the web, I think, one thing for Ingersoll himself, you could, the Wikipedia site gives a lot of references to works that refer to Ingersoll and also to Ingersoll's works, things that he wrote. So you might look at that as a starting point.
What was the name of that freethinker in the 50s?
Madeline Murray O'Hare was atheist, but
it was a man.
It was a man in the 50s.
Yeah.
I can't think of who that might be.
If it comes to me, I'll mention it on the air a little
There weren't
later.
many in the 50s, I don't think, with the McCarthy hearings.
No, this particular one. That's so true.
But yes, those are some starting points, and there are a number of atheists. They call it the New Atheism, and there are 4 or 5. Christopher Hitchens, Google Christopher Hitchens on the web, and you'll find a lot of things.
Sam Harris.
He's sort of an atheist who's a hawk, right? They vary across the political spectrum. And then Sam Harris. Yeah, Sam Harris is a young man working in neurobiology who's got a lot.
I was thinking about Bertrand Russell.
Yes. Bertrand Russell, absolutely.
50s,
yes.
60s,
yes.
that area.
Right.
He was doing a lot of writing on a Freethought topic. He's very good.
Do you have any other comments or questions?
No, sir. Just great show.
Well, thanks a lot.
How did you find us?
The ASK forum.
Okay, cool.
I just got a couple posts here and there to watch the show, and when you watch the religious shows before it's kind of funny. People touching people and acting like all kind of crazy stuff's happening.
Gets out of hand.
No, that was it. Thanks, gentlemen.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you for calling.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You had a few more, I think.
He said that anger is a wind which blows out the lamp of the mind. Have you ever noticed that when you get angry,
you stop thinking.
You quit thinking, and it's so easy to do, right? I mean, it's easy to do. There are in nature neither rewards nor punishments, and that's a big part of Christianity is rewards and punishment, and that's what we were all have ingrained in us if we were reared in Christian homes. But in nature there are neither rewards there are only consequences, and that's a difference. Now you have to treat consequences kind of the same way you would punishments.
Right.
So
well, the thing about it is,
but it's not supernatural.
The words reward and punishment connotate intent.
That's right.
So you get rewarded for as a response to doing the correct action. In other words, it also posits the other.
That's right.
Another doing in the action.
I mean, and when you think about it, Christianity puts you in a terrible bind to start with. You're automatically a sinful creature.
You're born sinful.
You're born. I mean, you may not have sin until you reach the age of accountability, as I was taught in the church I grew up in. However, by then, you are a sinner. And the only way you can escape eternal damnation, basically, is to believe on Christ. And so is that free will?
Not only that, but you inherited your sins of your father or whatever.
Well, yeah, I wasn't taught that. I wasn't taught that I actually inherited the sins of my father.
No. But
I had enough of my
sinner,
own.
though.
Yeah, I was born. I mean, the flesh is always sinful, and spirituality is the only way to be saved. And
of course, in Freethought, we believe there is no such thing as sin, because sin implies a God.
Right.
You can only sin against God.
That's right.
And if there's no God, there's no sin. However, there are consequences.
There are definitely consequences. Yeah, and if you don't believe it, if you make foolish, decisions, you'll eventually. Reap the consequences.
So many people would ask you, how can you live without God watching your every move? Well, I watch my every move.
Yeah.
I'm responsible to myself, to my wife, to my family, my extended family, the society, the police, and the government. We're all responsible to the society that we live in, and we want to make a better society if we have the correct intent.
Yeah.
And most of us do. You don't need a God for that.
That's right. Yeah.
Ingersoll.
And one more thing he said was that there is no slavery but ignorance. And I think that's one of the things that marks the meetings that I go to at Rationalists of East Tennessee, that there's ignorance. We're always trying to fight against ignorance. We're trying to learn more. Even if we sometimes are incapable of incorporating new ideas, we're still trying and investigating new ideas. And that's something that dogma prevents you from doing.
And that's one of the things about the Bible is if a society has one book that they turn to for all their answers, they're not going to do science. They're not going to do economy or ecology or politics, or they're not going to express themselves and explore the world around them. They're going to turn inward like the ancient Arabics did. If you have any questions like the previous viewer did about books and or links on Ingersoll, you can always send us an email at this address, and we'll be more than happy to send you back resource information to look up any of the things that we're talking about during the show.
Let me give a short summary of Robert Ingersoll's life. We've been talking about different things, but let me just summarize some things. He was born Robert Green Ingersoll, August the 11th, 1833 in Dresden, New York, and he died at the age of 65. He was younger than I am when he died. From congestive heart failure. He died in 1899 when he was 65 years old. And do you know where he's buried, Larry?
I do, but
he's buried Arlington National Cemetery. So he was given a military, because of his military service, he was buried in Arlington. His occupation, well, we've already talked about that. He was a politician. He was an orator. He was a lecturer. We have another phone call coming in.
And an attorney. Go ahead.
Hello, you're on the air. Could we have a nickname or a name, please?
It's Chuck.
Hey, Chuck.
Hi, Chuck. How are you doing today?
Since Lincoln and Ingersoll were contemporaries and both from Illinois, I'm just wondering if there was any interaction between the two of them.
Okay, now let's
hang up and listen for your answer.
Okay. Thank you very much for your call, Chuck.
Okay, thank you.
When was Lincoln born? Let's see. I knew that, but he may have, they were contemporaries, Chuck says. He must have had some interaction with Lincoln.
I would think so. Both are from Illinois. But I'm sorry, I haven't read anything in the histories that I've been reading over the last 3 days where Lincoln and he interacted at all.
But they were both Republicans.
Mm-hmm. I would say that they had to have.
They were both abolitionists.
Right. That brought up a pretty good question. Maybe our viewers know something about that. Call in and enlighten us all.
Do we have any American history majors out there in the audience who might answer that question? He was hobnobbing with the rich and the famous. There's no question about that.
He was in politics.
And he was in politics.
As a Republican.
So he must have at least had some close encounters with Honest Abe,
right.
I think.
I would think so.
We have another. Okay, so we have another call, I think, coming in, but we have to wait on our screener. He was an attorney, a very successful attorney, apparently. And did you know that he defended the people who were accused of blaspheming? And that set a precedent, even though it didn't do away with blasphemy laws. It for all practical purposes, ended charges being brought for blasphemy in this country.
Very good.
He did that.
Which is a victimless crime, anyway.
It's a victimless. Well, yeah. For us, it is. It may not be for Christians, though. But Ireland, I think, has a new blasphemy law. I'm going to Ireland.
They're at blasphemy laws recently, so
I'm going there on a vacation in September. Do you think I need to be careful?
No, let's test the laws. You're a foreigner.
I don't want to test the laws. I don't think I want to test it. He was an American, of course. His genres were satire, essay, social commentary, political commentary, philosophical literature, and biblical criticism. We have another caller. We have another caller.
Welcome to Freethought Forum. May we have a name or a nickname, please?
It's Rick.
Rick, welcome to Freethought Forum. Do you have a comment or question?
Yes, I just wanted to kind of make a correction. The gentleman mentioned about Lincoln being
Can you speak up a little bit? We're having a hard time hearing you.
Yes, he had mentioned that Lincoln was a contemporary of Ingersoll. People tend to make this issue kind of a point-blank type of thing. It just covers Lincoln in terms of how we describe him, but he was not an abolitionist. He was a practical politician, period. And, his writings indicate that he was more of a person who wanted to keep the Union together.
Right.
More than anything. He was not, abolitionists have a certain philosophy. And
it's ironic then that he did what he did.
But now, Rick, didn't he halfway through the Civil War sort of become an abolitionist and make that the whole point of the Civil War?
No. Anytime he wrote about what his attitude was, there was always a caveat attached to it that, the reason I'm doing this is not so much that I believe that people of African descent are equal stature, but this is really the only way. Any actions I take is the only way to keep the Union together, or to keep there from being more bloodshed. By the way, I might also add that I want my legacy to look good too. He did think about that.
I'm sorry, your voice dropped down there. We couldn't catch it. Could you say that again?
He tended to usually think in terms of what his legacy might be, in terms of how history would look at it.
But I saw a recent television program that portrayed Lincoln in a way I'd never seen him portrayed before. It was talking about how he halfway through the war, when it became obvious that it was going to be a bloody, messy affair, that he kind of stepped aside and sort of absolved himself a little and said, "This is God's war now. This is for retribution for slavery," and so forth. Isn't he quoted as saying things like that?
He may have made that quote, but if you really look at the quote, maybe in the context
I
what
see.
was said, I think you'd see that it was just just an observation more than anything, not necessarily that he believed. He believed that it had to happen. There was no other way. But the end product was less bloodshed, fewer people's lives being taken. But to openly say that if his concern was to truly, free the slaves, and to bring people of African descent into full citizenry, that was not, because if you read some of his writing, some of the correspondence that he had with people, it tends to show that he did not think that people of African descent were of equal stature in terms of citizenry in the United States.
Well, that's very interesting, and thank you very much for calling us. Do you have any other questions or comments about, how did you learn about our show, Rick?
Oh, I've seen you. I'm a frequent watcher of CTV, and I've called in a couple of times.
I see. Cool. Well, thanks a lot for your comment.
We have both the ASK and the RET organizations have very active email back and forth during our for our membership. I don't know which way your religious beliefs lie, but if you're interested in joining either one of the clubs, we'd be more than happy to have you. And you will find very intensive conversations
about anything.
Just about anything.
You're right.
So. Welcome.
I guess you could call me a Christian humanist, I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
Very
Well, thank you
interesting.
very
Well,
much.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have we shown the slide of Ingersoll's grandchildren yet? He was a family man in some sense. Now, I was hearing before I came over here today. My wife looked up something on the internet. Madeline Murray O'Hare's comments about him, and you'd think, well, she would be all positive, but she wasn't all positive. Madeline Murray O'Hare said that
she had a negative streak in her. That's for sure.
She did, and she was saying for some he's a saint, but he wasn't really a saint because he didn't provide enough for his children's education or something. But he emphasized family stuff a lot, didn't he? Mm-hmm. And these are a picture of his two grandchildren here. He had two daughters, and I think his father was married maybe at least 3 times. But I don't know. I don't find any mention of him having more than one wife. But he had 2 daughters, and then they bore some grandchildren, and that's a picture of him with his grandchildren.
Now, one of the things we wanted to mention is this entire month will be dedicated to Robert G. Ingersoll and his legacy and his works and his writings. Next week we will be looking at Some Mistakes of Moses, which is one of his broadsides, one of his pamphlets, if you want to call it, one of his writings. But it's a very long work, and it basically takes the first 5 books of the Bible and just rips it a new one, saying, what's wrong with this? What's wrong with this? Where are the inconsistencies? Why didn't this happen? It should be a very interesting show, and we invite all people to turn back into us next week.
So that's one of the things, I guess, that Christians point to today as they believe that a lot of the men of the Old Testament made lots of mistakes, and that's why God turned against them, right? And let the Jews be taken slaves and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing about it is, whenever God seems to want to teach a lesson, lots of people get killed, lots of people get pestilence and diseases and stuff.
That's right.
That just seems to be his teaching aid.
Right.
About the only one he knows.
Right, yes.
Now, Ingersoll made many observations on religion during his life, but he stated about the myth of hell, he said it represents all the meanness, all the revenge, all the selfishness, all the cruelty, all the hatred, all the infamy of which man, the heart of man, is capable. And that's true. I think about eternal punishment for finite crimes. In other words, if you found out that your son had turned against you and married somebody against your will or something, or taken over the business when you didn't want him to, you wouldn't lock him up in the basement and torture him for the rest of his life, much less eternity, which is what the concept of hell is all about.
You don't think that's a very loving God?
No. If anything, I agree with Madison, or was it what's his name, Thomas Paine, saying that he's the Old Testament is more the work of a demon than the work of, and I'll read it here. The historical context. I was wanting to talk just a minute about Thomas Paine. Ingersoll helped to revive the memory of Thomas Paine. You can see that on the top sign that he has posted where he's speaking there. That's him in the middle. He revived the memory of Thomas Paine from almost total obscurity. Before and during the American Revolution, Thomas Paine wrote many manuscripts like Common Sense, Crisis, The Rights of Man, to instigate and support and then revive the revolution at a time when it was most needed. When we had to have an eloquent hero, he was there. Thomas Paine pretty much single-handedly saved the revolution when just about everything was almost lost, and that was The Rights of Man that he wrote that brought that to fruition. However, after the revolution, he then wrote a book called The Age of Reason, which went in the direction of religion where the others went in the direction of monarchies and totalitarian governments and rights of man and stuff. He wrote what he thought about religion. Many people started to shun and denounce him, and when he died, his body was moved several times and ultimately lost. We don't know where his body is now. Here's an excerpt from The Age of Reason where Thomas Paine was talking about the Old Testament. Whenever we read the obscene stories, the voluptuous debaucheries, the cruel and torturous executions, the unrelenting vindictiveness with which more than half the Bible is filled, it would be more consistent to call it the work of a demon rather than the Word of God. It is a history of wickedness that has served to corrupt and brutalize mankind, and for my part, I sincerely detest it, as I detest everything that is cruel. And we also have to remember that it was the text of the Old Testament that supported the cruelty and barbarism of the Spanish Inquisition, as well as Puritanism and slavery. So thank you for Robert G. Ingersoll for reviving the memory of Thomas Paine.
Okay, so there were men in history, and women too, who didn't fall for just automatically accept the say the Bible, or Muslim scriptures for that reason, for that matter too, probably, who stood out as voices of reason to try and understand what it really means to be compassionate.
And it's really amazing when you consider that so many of these people were born into Christian households and raised from the earliest knowledge, being told that it's all true and never to question it.
Right.
I mean,
That's
questioning itself is a sin.
Oh, of course it is. Yes,
so
of course it is.
It's just amazing.
And sometimes in the group that I'm in, Rationalists of East Tennessee, I come across people who say they were reared in an agnostic or atheist household, and they really are unprepared if they move to the South or anywhere where there are fundamental Christians, that anybody really takes it seriously.
One of the reasons I'm not sure if you have anything that you want to get into right now, but one of the reasons I feel that it's very big problem teaching your children anything about supernatural beliefs, even Santa Claus at some point. If you're not going to later turn it around and say, that was false, you're basically letting them in for a belief that somebody else can watch them all the time and judge them all the time and have a punishment ready for them all the time. And that leaves them with, I call them hooks, that other people can then take advantage of. You were talking about religious leaders.
Right.
Like David Koresh.
You can become vulnerable.
You can become vulnerable. That's very good.
That's right. And sometimes I've seen churches that are more surface in a sense, so their children and being reared with the background nevertheless want more from spirituality, and therefore they can really be vulnerable to an extreme form of spirituality.
Right. Einstein himself said we should not tie morality to an authoritarian or a mythical basis, because it then becomes vulnerable if the authority is lost.
That's right.
Or the myth is discovered.
That's right.
Then the morality collapses. Morality needs to be based on humanism and respect for your fellow man.
And sometimes,
and that's good enough.
And sometimes I get asked, well, what do you base your morality on if you don't believe in the Bible? Well, you've been asked that, I'm sure. And so at first, that was a problem. When I left Christianity, that was a problem I asked myself. And I was afraid, frankly, I think, that I was going to, where was I going to obtain my morality? Well, morality is in a sense built into us.
Right.
As evolved human beings. It's built into us. And so people have the capability to be moral, and they have a capability to be unselfish, and they have the capability to be selfish. All of these things. It's a balancing act.
Well, it's a product of society.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't have to be handed down from above. We have to have morality to be able to get along with each other and have a viable society.
That's right.
I'm trying to look for the closing notes and don't see them.
Here we go.
We've got about a minute left in the show. We're trying to find our closing notes, and I can't find mine.
Right, here we go.
But to the rescue. Time to start wrapping things up. Get out your pen and paper. This is our email address above us. You can write in and talk about or ask about any of the topics or links that we mentioned during the show today. If you have any questions about Ask or RET, how to contact us, you can do that there as well.
You can see this show most Tuesdays from 5 to 6.
We'd like to thank Sam and Lee, Forrest, for technical help, and to the staff of CTV, that's Community Television of Knoxville, and all of our callers.
We leave you with Robert Ingersoll's creed. Happiness is the only good. The time to be happy is now. The place to be happy is here. The way to be happy is to make others happy too. Thank you for tuning in
Happy
this
trails.
afternoon.